time to discover what debut is, and we're about to do that any minute now. It is happening. Debut. Welcome to Debut, a fusion of storytelling and play. If you haven't heard about Debut, we hope you will, because today we have an interview from a person that will be debuting a story. And what Debut is three amazing, accomplished storytellers who will tell a story for the first time. We believe there's beauty in the beginning. And let me tell you about the person that we're interviewing today. Jessica Robinson, founder of Better Said Than Done, and if you don't know about it, you should, has performed at the National Women's Equality Monument, the Miracle Theater, and at the International Storytelling Festival. She on PBS's Stories from the Stage. She's also the co-author of Roar, True Tales of Women Warriors, and leads storytelling workshops around the country, and since 2012. Now, that's what it says on paper. Let me tell you a little bit of what I know about Jessica from talking with her and also knowing some of her work. She is a deep, attuned listener to storytelling. She also sees where storytelling has a need, for such as creating the Women's Storytelling Festival. And she is quite a talented personal teller of tales. Let me bring on Jessica Robinson. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, Kevin.
How are
Nice
you?
to be here. I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Sometimes I'm a morning riser. I don't know where people are, but I'm waking up, ready for a story. And you've been on this journey. There you go. That's the best thing. You've been on this journey since 2012, probably before that. Tell me, how did story find you?
Well, you want the long story or the short story?
It's up to you.
All right. You got like an hour or two, right?
Oh, okay.
I've been writing since I was a kid. Like I tell people I won a Young Authors Award in sixth grade. So story has always been part of my life. I have a BFA in film and video production, and I was doing screenplay writing. I've done short story writing and poetry. Storytelling, oral performance of story came to me in 2007 when I went to a personal storytelling show in DC. And it was an open mic, and I liked what I saw, and they said, "Hey, anyone want to tell a story? You can." And I was like, "All right, I'll try it." So I did, and I did not fail, which
that's a good thing. That's a very good thing.
Differently, yeah. And then I've been addicted ever since.
Did you find that you had a storytelling community? You're in Virginia, right? I don't know where in Virginia. I know that
I'm outside DC, so.
Okay. I know that when I would come into storytelling, I looked around and like it was a festival and it moved on and I couldn't find anything for 2 years. Did you find a warm and welcoming community? I was 18 at the time, and so I couldn't find anyone that was 18 or 19 who wanted to be a storyteller.
Yeah, so yes and no. So what I found was there was storytelling happening, and some people were it was partly a community and partly a sort of every man for himself sort of environment, which is part of the reason I started Better Said Than Done, because I didn't like the sort of competitive feel of like getting on the stage and, oh, we don't like you so much and we like you. And so if we like you, you'll get on the stage. And if we don't like you, you won't. And I've always been more of I've always been a bit of a nerd, so I have a soft spot for people who don't make the cut, So I kind of wanted to create a real community feel for people who wanted to do storytelling, who maybe weren't what, one group was looking for.
So you would have all kinds of storytellers, is what you're saying, and welcome that, and because you're right, it can be somewhat competitive, and sometimes we can see the same people on the same stages, and they've worked hard to be there. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes there's a penchant to like, oh well, we'll always have that person, and but you want to find other spaces, or you've created spaces so that people can tell stories. Is there an audition for Better Said Than Done?
So it, right now is a weird time.
Yeah, well, that's true for everything.
Yes. So the way it worked when we were solely in person in Fairfax, Virginia, was we'd put our themes out for 6 months and people would, send in pitches. And for the most part, it was first come, first serve. If someone came and was offensive in any way, or, in any other way really turned the audience off, or, hurt people in any way, they were not welcome back. But for the most part, people are welcome back to our stage, if there's room, and as long as they show that they're trying to actually tell a good story, and not offend anyone. And live in-person shows, we'd fill up 2 months in advance. It wouldn't be like it is now. But since we've gone virtual, I have a wait list for like 6 months, because there's only 12 spots a month, and there's a lot of us out there. So so these days it's the same process, send a pitch, but it's also send a pitch and then, I'll put you in next time there's an opening. So,
which is great to allow new voices to come into the fray of just they may not want to be a professional storyteller, but they have this dying story or this story that they need to tell. And I think we need those spaces. There were times that storytelling was only being done primarily, actually, I'm going to roll that back, known in festivals, but they were always in bars. They were always in centers, but I think there's more of a revival. Let's go to the title, Better Said Than Done. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, actually, there's a story there. I liked the idea of so in personal storytelling, often, at least for me, and I've experienced other people have the same experience, the worst experiences in life make great stories. So if for example, we have a travel show in July, and if you've gone on a trip and it went well, it's not really a great story. But if you went on a trip and there was a disaster, you got a story out of it. So I was trying to come up with this idea for what expression would say that things are better in the telling than in the in the experience of them. And then while I was sort of workshopping possible names, one night I had a dream, and my dad had passed away just a couple months before. And in the dream, my dad, who an Italian from New Jersey, he was a plain speaker, so he just said, "Come on, stupid, it's better said than done." And I woke up and I was like, "Thanks, Dad." So he gave me the name.
What a gift! What a gift! And as an Italian. Yeah. And Appalachian and Irish, I can understand. And Dave, you came as my wife kind of said, "What are you debuting now?" In some sense, she was better at saying it. And and that's the other thing. As good storytellers, we have to be good listeners. Mike Perry was a debut teller recently, and he reminded me in a conversation that when a baby is born, the first thing that they have is their hearing. And when a person passes from this world, the last thing they have is their hearing. So for me, listening is just as important as storytelling. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think not only as a producer of storytelling, but also as a storyteller, one of the hardest things about being online right now is that it is hard to listen to your audience. So it's, I think many of us have figured out how to do that, but it's definitely different than being at a show and seeing people, dab their eyes if they're crying, or laugh when you thought they were going to laugh, or not laugh or laugh when you didn't think they were going to laugh. But yes, I think you have to listen to the audience, but also to yourself.
But Jessica, you have a unique vantage point from being a videographer. So you can listen to recordings in a different way maybe than someone else does as a storyteller and videographer. How has that improved, or has it, the way that you do video on Better Said Than Done or a recorded production?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the reason we were one of the first groups out there doing digital virtual shows, because it just it I made the transition in my brain very quickly to, oh, we should just take this online. Um, and I also, at least in the early days, these days I don't do it so much because everyone's been doing this. But in the early days, I did a lot of coaching for everyone who came on the show about, how much headroom you should have, what kind of lighting you needed, the kind of mic you needed, that kind of stuff. And I even I made a series of videos for people to watch to help them, prepare to perform on a in a little box. Um, so I think that's helped with the quality of the video of our shows. And then I've learned from watching, other storytellers, Megan Wells and Jeff Gear, for example, are just, they're so brilliant at using the space. And I love, and, it's, so I've started adapting my style of performance more based on seeing other fantastic performers and how they're doing it. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the video background helped me make better looking videos for our Zoom audiences, but I think, there's still the performance aspect. So
And that's why I think storytelling Zoom is so much different than business Zoom or
yeah.
a talk Zoom, because they know what it's like to perform before an audience. I actually wrote an article that says, we can keep that in mind when we're moving. The thing is, with the advent of change within storytelling, I don't say this very often, but there was a time when youth tellers were coming in the foray, and very few. And I talked to some well-known storytellers who said to me, they can't do that. And it was the unusual factor. It was the newness, and the same when someone brought in dance and storytelling on a national stage. I was there. I mean, that's been done for years, but when it was moving about, they're like, "Oh, is that storytelling?" It's always being questioned, and then people like, "I would never do Zoom." So I'm reminded of for 11 years, I was a full-time high school storytelling teacher. And I said to a well-known storyteller, I said, I love working with kids. They don't know the rules, and so they can break them. And I remember she said, I don't like that at all. Long story in the sense of, I guess we've got to be accepting to change, don't you think?
Oh yes, definitely. And so here's a ironically, for one of our first shows, I asked Ann Rutherford and Norm Brecky to be on it, and they were like, "No, no, we're not going to do that. Like, we don't want to go virtual."
I
And
see them
and Ann will
everywhere.
tell you this. Yes, and since then, yes, they've said yes to me, and then obviously they've been in a lot of shows. But so they were open to change. They didn't want to do it initially, but they did, and now they're all over the place. But also, I went on one of their shows. A liar's show, and I'm normally tell personal stories, so I haven't done much lying. I've done a couple liar shows, and it was just basically what they and the other people said was, I haven't heard a lie like that before,
Oh,
because I'm not experienced as a liar, so I just kind of did what I would normally do and changed it into a lie, and I guess it was a different experience for people. So I like stepping out of my comfort zone. I like stepping out of my type of style, because you do end up with this sort of fusion of things that are happening when you're combining different styles that you don't know what you're doing.
hey, I like the word fusion. I think I'll use that in debut. Wait, we already do. And that's the whole thing, is that we don't talk about the story making process. We keep it private, and we only throw out the storytelling. And so in debut, I had to look around. I mean, as a storyteller, you have to look to find the corners to find the person to learn from, from watching, but there's a whole bunch to the process. Um, I'm going to ask one more producing question, then we want to talk about your process. Um,
Uh-oh.
I also noticed that you're aligning storytelling to support causes like Black Lives Matter, and I want you to feel free to share a little bit about that, because that looks like a great show.
Yeah, so we last year, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, we had our first Black Stories Matter show, where we had an all-Black cast sharing just incredibly powerful stories of what it's like to live Black in America. And it's not that we've never had those stories before, but there was power, just like with the Women's Storytelling Festival. There is power in giving one group a platform, because the stories all fed into each other and created this moment. And we were able to raise a lot of money for Black Lives Matter DC. So this year we're doing it again, and this time we've partnered with the Fairfax County NAACP. So that's who we're benefiting this year. And it's hard because I'm a producer. So of course I think raising the money is very important, but I also think the storytelling part of it is very important, because I truly believe that I had people after last year's show say, people I know to be conservative say, I never thought of it that way. Yeah. So people heard these stories and learned something in the way that they don't learn something from watching the news. And I hope the same thing happens this year.
So I just edited a collection, which will be out next year, called Social Action Stories, Impact Stories for the School and for School and Community. And what I say in the forward, I edited with two others, that, I can only be who I am, but I can hopefully provide a space for voices that we haven't heard. And it sounds like this particular event can do that as well, but it's not just one, and it's a combination of many things. I was able to see the Women's Storytelling Festival, and where you just said I hadn't heard that, I found myself sitting down and going, wow, I need to listen to this more. I need to listen to this deeper. How does the Women's Storytelling Festival have a different resonance than a regular festival?
Yeah. I don't know. But I heard from people over and over again that it felt different. And it's not, and I've tried to explain it, and I haven't come up with a great way of explaining it, but it's all women telling stories, and some of them are fairy tales, and some of them are traditional, and some of them are historic, and some of them are personal. But there is a power in letting yourself bring your own femininity out. So, it might be a traditional story, but it's got a feminine angle to it. It might be a story about something that we personally deal with, that men don't deal with. So I think just having women only sharing stories, just like having any other group that you separate out from the rest, it's almost like it creates a safe space, I guess, for us to be us, in a more freeing way than when I just go on any other show.
Well, I want to thank you for all the work that you have done to really bring those voices to the foray. We try to do we try to bring all kinds of voices in debut. And if people want to be on debut, just contact me. You mentioned Anne and Norm. I need to get them here soon. Let's talk about your process. How do you, and has it changed since 2012?
Yes. Yes. So 2007 was when I told my first professional story. And for that, I wrote it out word for word and memorized it word for word, and I did that probably for a couple of years before, because I have a writing background, so that's just the way my brain worked. But as I've got more comfortable being on stage, now I hardly ever write them out. I will write out bullets and then memorize the steps. I know Donald Davis in a workshop talked about, stepping stones, getting from this side of the river to the other side of the river, and stepping onto each point. So I kind of just try to write out the, bullet point, the plot twists, the turning points, and then fill in the rest in my head by speaking out loud. Often I do it while I'm walking around my neighborhood. So I bring a phone and pretend I'm on the phone so it doesn't look weird.
I don't bring the phone. I look weird, and people run away from me.
It's another good method. So there you go.
um, well, just today I read all the places that you're telling stories, and then you said, but I haven't written them down. I haven't written them down. So I wanted to ask that question. So it sounds like you write down the stones to get to where it needs to be. Reese Collins calls that characteristic language, the language that moves it forward. And you know,
Mm.
I'm a writing director. I often believe that we can handcuff ourselves into the world that we're telling about if all we do is move it on paper first. I believe we should word dance. We should literally
Ooh.
play in the words and let them word dance, or we'll get handcuffed to that paper because that's the frame upon which we work with. It
Mm.
sounds like you have some similar thoughts that way.
I love that word dance. I'm gonna steal that.
Please do. I actually have a CD on word dance.
Oh, well, I might steal that too.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's yes, I agree with that, but I do think it's different, obviously, for oral storytelling because I still do write written word pieces, and that obviously you have to write out. But I found that my performance feels more natural, and the word dancing helps come up with these with an authentic sounding voice if I actually speak out my stories as opposed to trying to write them down. Because if I try to write them down exclusively, then I end up, like you said, being chained to words that maybe don't sound like the way I would normally speak. So yes, I will write out sometimes. So my process changes with every story. That's the
I
honest
love
answer.
that. No, I
It's
love that.
yeah,
And the process changes with every story because each story calls out differently.
that's
And
yes,
it took me
exactly.
years to realize that you could
Yeah.
word dance this story, but write it down. I find as a writer that since I came from a telling and writing perspective, that even when I'm writing, I have a telling voice that moves it better. What do you think for you?
Yeah, so I wrote a novel a couple of years ago actually that's it
Yesterday.
yeah. Yeah. I'm working on another one, but I find that I when I'm editing, I will read it out loud and see how it flows. It's not the same. I mean, people aren't generally reading books out loud. I mean, the audiobook obviously is read out loud, but I feel like you can hear the rhythm when you say it out loud. And I think that even written word needs to have that kind of rhythm. So my daughter, is 7, and I've been reading her a lot of books. And it's funny, I read her the Harry Potter series, and that one flows. It reads very well. It has a good mouth feel. But then I just read the Wizard of Earthsea to her, which she loved, by the way. But that it was so hard to read out loud. It's just like, oh, it was, yeah. So I that's a classic. People are still going to read that for generations. But I feel like there's a reason some books are very successful, and I think part of it is the rhythm that I think you can do a better job writing if you hear the words in your head as well.
And I have found that there's different cultural implications for the rhythm of what you read as well. A
Mm.
native tale doesn't sound, I mean, there's over 750 Native American tribes, so I hate to say native tale, but a certain tribe would turn, or certain native people would say this, or certain place in Africa. But, it's a lot. That's why we need to do our homework on our stories. I remember being a freshman English teacher and saying to all my students in California, "You haven't read The Hobbit? Oh my gosh, we got to get The Hobbit." So I went out and bought like 30 copies of The Hobbit. I start reading out loud. Oh my God, it was a chore. I did not have them. I really did. And I love The Hobbit. Don't get me wrong. And I think if I keep them, it doesn't start with reading it out loud until you're ready, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and so I love what you say that every story merits a different way of design. And so A lot of guilds. I've been to a lot of guilds, you know, whether I'm helping the guild or starting the guild. I'm used to moving to a place and then having to start a guild, you know, because there's nothing there. When I moved to California, I wrote to all the guilds and said, I'm story starved. And they all gave me advice to start a guild. Um, I've noticed that many practice their stories and then they get comments of like, that was good, next, you know, and they don't do a lot with like working through the process. What advice would you have for people to work through the process? It doesn't have to be at a guild meeting, even though I would argue it could.
I always run my story past somebody else. So that's part of the community in Better Said Than Done, but also, you know, this past year, I feel like we've built an extended community, which is wonderful. So, yeah, I would never, well, I would almost never, sometimes it's last minute, but I would almost never premiere a story that I haven't had someone else who wasn't there listen to, if for no other reason than to let me know if it's understandable, because of course if it's in my head I understand it, but the listener might not know all the facts. So I would always recommend running your story with people who don't know the story already.
It's good advice, and it comes back to what you said about seeing their faces, being alive. Even if you can't see it on Zoom, you can see it in that practice. And so, telling to your mailbox is a lot different than telling to the mail carrier.
Have
And
you
we,
done that?
I think I
Sit
have.
outside and talk to your mailbox?
I've actually done both, mailbox and mail carrier, I think. But we do need that live interaction. And you know, I say we need deep listening partners, not
Hmm.
necessarily people to critique us immediately, or a person that's like, if I was you, I'd do this. You can do suggestions, but having deep listening partners often allows us to hear the story ourselves through
Yeah,
their eyes.
we rehearse every show, and we have since the beginning, just because not because we're trying to, well, because I just think having various listeners give feedback is important. So it's optional. People don't have to rehearse, but I personally love it, and many people come to rehearsal. Um, but what I tell people when giving feedback is really don't tell people what you think they should do, but more just tell people the questions that came up during the stories. What did you not understand? What would you like to know more about? And then, you know, what felt extraneous. So, and then if there's any other major things that you feel like you need to say, but those are the three main areas. It's really just what the story listener didn't understand, wanted to know more about, or didn't feel was necessary.
So there's a difference between, you know, stories that are moving toward being ready and then stories that are in a state of play. Um,
Mm,
and so in the state of play, I use imagine, I wonder, and have you considered. I believe those are the
mm.
three powerful things that we can do in various shapes and forms. But before I start asking about your connection with play, what is your challenge to yourself as a storyteller as we move forward, or as you move forward into the storytelling tradition?
So I've been on a journey since 2018. I did Exchange Place in 2018,
Oh, wonderful.
and that opened my eyes. So in the DC area, we primarily have personal storytelling. There's not much. There's the Grapevine, Noah Baum's show, where they bring in different types of storytellers, but most of the shows in the area are personal storytelling. And I didn't have exposure really to traditional storytelling until I went to Jonesboro, um, which is the opposite journey that a lot of people this last year have been, you know, experiencing. You know, there's so many traditional storytellers and story listeners out there, and since we've gone online, there have been a lot of people who are like, "What? These are personal stories." Like it's many people don't listen to personal stories and listen to traditional, but that's the opposite experience I had. So I've been playing and exploring different forms of storytelling, and I'm loving it. Like I've loved telling a lie with with the Good Liars Club, and I've told some pure adventure stories that I've made up from scratch. I'm working on an adventure story for your show, so I'm enjoying trying to tell different types of stories. That's my journey at the moment.
And I love that journey. And there are some people that are like, I'm only a traditional teller, but I've never told a personal tale. It's like the person that we were talking about, young adult offline, said, you know, young adult will never reach the canon of literature. And it was a New York Times article, and at the end it said, I've never read a young adult book. And I was like, hello, no. And so I think everybody, and that's the spirit of play, should play with different styles of storytelling, the different shaping. They're like, well, I'm not comfortable with ghost stories. Well, are you comfortable with anything the first time out? You know?
Yeah, and you shouldn't be comfortable with art. I mean, that's, you know, if you get comfortable, then you start to lose it as an artist. You start to lose your creativity if you don't push yourself.
And behind that, sometimes I'm hearing, it's real work to tell a ghost story. You know?
Yes, yes. And if you want to keep doing this, then you should, you know, maybe work at it.
Exactly. And we need to burgeon the field kind of thing and give ourselves permission to play. So that comes to the question, how is play influential, if at all, in your work?
So I will tell you that the part of your show that terrifies me the most is the play part. If you don't know this, I am very controlled. I took an improv class once and I did not like it. I like to have everything prepared in advance. So I mean, I play as I speak to myself, you know, as I walk around the neighborhood with my phone in my ear. But I don't do a lot of play with other people watching. So that should be fun.
Well, I hope it's less terrifying because we're all here to support you. And I believe that the risk of fear will be lessened when we're all working for the same cause. And,
right.
You know, with that crazy, horrific, or not horrific, but fun permission to play pledge, we say we give ourselves permission to make mistakes. We're very forgiving. We actually,
Yes.
we create fear from when we're children. When we say things like, you were so brave to get up there. When we should say, thank you for the gift of coming. And it is really important. If we, I was telling someone the other day, the research that I'm doing on story is a lot of it is acceptance and denial. Our personal tales are hinged on acceptance and denial, and play is about releasing for acceptance and not denying. And it's the real work that we do. And I'm biased, of course, but we are better storytellers. And we're nervous. And I have one other teller that's coming on debut that is extremely fearful of the play. But, you know, what I loved about what he said, Kevin, although I'm fearful, I trust you. So trust me, no one's died yet.
Oh, that's good. Hey, that's a good record.
And so
maybe you could use that when you're soliciting storytellers. No one's died yet.
Yeah. We had someone with a heart. No. If anything, we've heard the joy that comes from the play, and that brings to the question, although a little fearful, why debut?
I like you, Kevin, and I like what you're doing. No, I'm serious. It's storytelling is very personal, and I like you, and that makes me feel comfortable. And I've seen some of your shows, and I have enjoyed watching other storytellers not die on your show. So I'm hoping.
Well, the admiration is mutual, and you know, I tell people that sometimes it's mental calisthenics. But I love it. I love just knowing that I may help the person with direction, or most importantly, think about their own choices and explore something else. It doesn't have to be solidified. We're just playing. We're having fun. But it is the real work of life.
if you say so.
When is debut? And I'll help you if you don't know.
Okay.
June 27th.
Yes, June 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern.
That's right. And if you're somewhere else, please come in at your time. And so, Jessica, I so appreciate that you can come on Debut. I appreciate the fact that all the listening, deep listening that you're doing for other people and spaces that you're giving them. But I also value your voice. I have heard you tell stories. I have seen you take risks. And I so appreciate watching this develop and grow. And I'm here to help play anytime you need me. Jessica Robinson, I am going to give you the last word.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I don't know if you know what you've just done. I really am looking forward to coming on Debut. Even though it terrifies me, I am enjoying the prospect of playing with you, and I know it's going to be a great show. And I'm so excited too because the other storytellers, I am huge fans. So I'm looking forward to debuting with you and with them. And I'll see you on June 27th at 2 p.m.